Well, good evening and welcome to the 13th annual Connecticut Wall of Honor ceremony. I want to thank you all for joining us to honor the 65 Connecticut soldiers who bravely gave their lives defending our state and our country. We will begin our program with the posting of the colors by the Connecticut National Guard Honor Guard. And now, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would direct your attention to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before I invite Governor Lamont to the podium, and invite our other speakers as well, I wanted to share with you the story of how this Wall of Honor came to be and its significance to our beautiful state. In 2007, the state of Connecticut, under the leadership of my predecessor, former Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman, and Hartford area radio host Brad Davis, established the Wall of Honor here at our state's Capitol building to recognize the members of the armed forces from Connecticut who were killed in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan since the terrorist attacks at 9/11. Additionally, we are very appreciative each year of the support offered by our Connecticut Military Department and members of the Connecticut National Guard, the American Legion Post 79 of Madison, the Connecticut Gold Star Mothers, the Connecticut Blue Star Mothers, the American Legion Riders, the Patriot Guard Riders, and the Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association. And we're looking forward to the day when they can all join us to celebrate this special time. I'm deeply honored to carry on the tradition of holding a ceremony at the Wall each year on Thursday before Memorial Day in May to honor the sacrifices of these brave Connecticut men and women. Unfortunately, this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the temporary closure of the state Capitol building, we can't gather in person with many supporters as we usually do. Nevertheless, we appreciate the CTN network for providing us with the digital support to stream this important ceremony to the families of these soldiers and other members of the public. With that, I would now like to invite to the podium Lieutenant Colonel Eric Wismar for our invocation. Lieutenant Colonel.
I invite you to join together with me for an opening word of prayer. Almighty God, we thank you for your comfort and sustaining power throughout our lives, including times of sorrow and grief. As we remember together all of our Connecticut service members who sacrificed their lives in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan since September 11th, we ask that you would fill our hearts and minds with fond memories and images of times we shared in days and years gone by. For the families and friends who knew and loved these service members so well, we ask for the comfort and support that only you can provide. We take solace in knowing that they and their legacy are not forgotten. May this ceremony be a reminder for all of us to strive to make the most of our remaining years. Like King David, we ask you to teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Wisdom to do the things that are most important, wisdom to spend our days loving you and one another, to shine your light in the darkness, to bring beauty out of ashes, to usher in triumph over tragedy. So we humbly ask you for such wisdom and guidance each and every day, and we humbly ask this in the power and authority of your most holy name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Wismar. To the viewers watching at home, I hope you are all healthy and safe during these uncertain and unprecedented times. Over the past couple of months, we have seen so many people across our state step up to serve in many different capacities in response to the COVID-19 epidemic. I know that if the 65 men and women memorialized in the photos behind me were still here today, they would have been some of the very first to volunteer, because that's who they were. You see, this wall tells a story of our Connecticut heroes, people who wanted to serve, people who wanted to help. And when our country needed them most, that's what they did. Each of them deserves to be remembered as the heroes they were. And while we don't have time today to recount the stories of each of those 65 people, I want to share one memorable story today. Army Specialist Tiana Avery Felder of Bridgeport died just 2 days after she was wounded by a roadside bomb in Iraq. She was 22 years old at the time. She had grown up in Bridgeport, attended Colby Cathedral High School, where she played basketball and sang in the choir. She took classes at Southern Connecticut State University, and after completing her freshman year, she joined the Army. She married on December 20th, 2002, to a fellow soldier named Adrian Felder, who she met in Fort Lewis, Washington. A year after the wedding, Tiana was shipped out for Iraq with Stryker Brigade, where she was a cook. Her death happened a week before she was scheduled to go on leave and visit her family in her beloved Bridgeport. She is the first woman soldier from Connecticut to die in the war in Iraq. She was awarded both the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. So it's important to never forget her story, her service, and the service of all of those who gave their lives in service to our country. We are proud of Tiana and all the Connecticut men and women who gave their lives to protect all of us. Today, we honor their sacrifice and service, and we're thinking of their family and friends who love them and miss them still. And now, it is my honor to introduce our leader, Governor Ned Lamont. Governor.
Thank you, Susan. We'll remember Tiana and each and every one of the young men and women you see here who gave their lives fighting for something much bigger than themselves. And that is why we remember Memorial Day and remember the people you see in this room. Memorial Day has many different fathers. I tend to think of Abraham Lincoln, who in 1863, 4 months after the Battle of Gettysburg, probably the bloodiest battle this country has ever known, took the train up to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, had to suffer through a 2-hour speech by the governor of Massachusetts, Edward Everett. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter speech. And then President Lincoln stood up and in about 231 words said what Memorial Day is all about. It was called the Gettysburg Address. 407 years ago, our forefathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And now we're engaged in a great civil war to see whether this nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Don't worry. The President went on to say we're dedicating this hallowed ground to young men. In that case, it was young men who had given their lives for a cause bigger than themselves. And that's why we celebrate the people behind us here. That's why we remember Memorial Day. And that's why we remember always to believe and fight for things bigger than ourselves. Thank you.
Governor, thank you so much. I'd like to bring forward Major General Francis Yvonne, the Adjutant General of the Connecticut National Guard. General.
Thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor. I have the honor to now present remarks by one of our Gold Star families. On behalf of Connecticut Gold Star families, Ray and I wish to thank the state of Connecticut for your remembrance and honoring efforts this evening and throughout this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you, Governor Lamont, Lieutenant Governor Bysowitz, Commissioner Sadi, and myself, General Yvonne, for your presence and dedication to our fallen. On the day that our loved ones laid down their lives, Memorial Day became part of our grief. While we live Memorial Day every day, this yearly holiday is traditionally filled with ceremonies, activities, and efforts of remembrance that let us know that our loved ones and their sacrifices are not forgotten. We have all been bracing for this weekend, and Monday, as our paths of grief have been altered by necessary precautions and limitations on gathering and travel. To a Gold Star family, your devotion to conduct this ceremony, despite the current circumstances, tells us that Memorial Day is circled on the calendar of your hearts. It is the overcoming efforts, such as this Wall of Honor ceremony, and the efforts of others that will be much needed comfort this year. It has been 15 years since our son, Lance Corporal Lawrence Philippon, was killed in Iraq on May 8th, 2005. Our casualty officer, Captain Brian Latendre, was killed 1 year later on May 3rd, 2006. May is a month of mayhem to us. The deaths of those who serve our nation are public deaths. When Larry raised his hand to take the oath of duty, he became a son of every American, as do all others who take that oath. They make us family, and their passing is a shared public cross to bear. For each mention of our loved ones, and for each offer of gratitude for their sacrifice, we, the families, are able to find solace in knowing their legacies shine on. While our fallen fought and perished for Americans to be able to celebrate this day as they wish, heartfelt efforts to commemorate Memorial Day with reflection and honor are truly how we ought to spend at least a portion of this day. And as we take the time to remember our fallen, we will honor them best by keeping in our hearts, prayers, and unwavering efforts those brothers and sisters in arms who walked beside them in battle. We couldn't be without Larry or with Larry when he was taken from this earth. We believe God placed him amongst brothers who love him and will carry his memory and legacy safely through the rest of their lives. But they will also carry the honor of that day and the battles and losses they endured for the rest of their deployment. The unspoken bond they share and the legacy they carry is like no other. That legacy is one of honor. It has been passed down through the ages from warrior to warrior, each looking to the history of those who went before them and drawing on their strength and courage. We are forever blessed as a nation to have individuals who answer the call to give up their lives, if necessary, to preserve our freedoms. Our military men and women, past, present, and future, are national treasures. For those that did not come home, President Reagan's quote speaks to the loss of their lives. And I quote, "They gave up 2 lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for their country, for us. All we can do is remember. Ray and I wish to add to that quote because we feel that we can do more than just remember. We can ensure that the brothers and sisters in arms of our fallen are properly honored and cared for when they come home. To our fellow Gold Star families, we stand together in our hearts this Memorial Day. Among our ranks, we cherish each other's stories, our loved ones, as we are bound as family in the loss of our heroes. This wall is a testament to their being together, watching, waiting, and applauding the tremendous efforts of those who remember and bring comfort to their families. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. John 15:13. God bless you all, and may you have a meaningful and honorable Memorial Day. Ray and Lisa Philippon.
Thank you so much to the Philippon family for that beautiful message. And thank you to Major General Yvonne. Now, what I'd like to do is call upon General Yvonne and Captain David Pitlick, who will come forward, and they will read the names of the fallen. General.
Army Private First Class Wilfredo Perez, Jr., Norwalk. Army Staff Sergeant Richard Eaton, Jr., Guilford. Army Sergeant David Travis Friedrich, Naugatuck. Army Private First Class Anthony D'Agostino, Waterbury. Army Sergeant Major Philip Albert, Terryville. Army Private First Class Jeffrey Braun, Stafford. Army Captain Eric Palodua, Farmington. Army Sergeant Benjamin Gilman, Meriden. Army Specialist Tiana Avery Felder, Bridgeport. Army Sergeant Felix Del Greco, Simsbury.
Army Private First Class Melissa Hobart, East Haven. Army Specialist Jacob Martir Gutierrez, Norwich. Army Chief Warrant Officer William Brennan, Bethlehem. Army Sergeant Joseph M. Nolan, Waterbury. Army Lieutenant Colonel Michael J. McMahon, West Hartford. Army Staff Sergeant Henry Irizarry, Waterbury. Army Specialist Robert Hoyt, Ashford. Army Staff Sergeant Thomas Vitagliano, New Haven. Army Specialist Christopher Hoskins, Danielson. Army Major Stephen C. Reich, Washington.
Army Private First Class Nicholas Medeiros, Wilton. Army Captain Jason R. Hamill, Salem. Army Staff Sergeant Joe E. Fanoff II, Eastford. Army Sergeant Richard Ford, East Hartford. Army Private First Class Stephen K. Richardson, Bridgeport. Army First Lieutenant Keith Heidemann, Norwich. Army Private First Class Orlando E. Gonzalez, Bridgeport. Army Private First Class Andre Craig, New Haven. Army Sergeant Jason Lanteri, Killingworth. Army First Lieutenant Thomas J. Brown, Shelton.
Army Captain Benjamin Sclaver, Hamden. Army Staff Sergeant Ronald Spino, Waterbury. Army Sergeant Edward Kramer, Southington. Army Specialist Dennis Pratt, Southington. Army Staff Sergeant Edwin Rivera, Waterford. Army Sergeant Stephen DeLuzio, Glastonbury. Army Private First Class Gebra Noonan, Watertown. Army Specialist David R. Fahey, Jr., Norwalk. Army Sergeant First Class Dae Han Park, Watertown. Army Staff Sergeant Frank Adamski III, Plainfield.
Army Specialist Richard C. Emmons III, North Granby. Army Private First Class Eric D. Suffreen, Woodbridge. Army Sergeant Edward J. Frank II, Hartford. Army Staff Sergeant Ari R. Cullers, Waterford. Army Specialist Philip C.S. Schiller, Winstead. Army Captain Andrew Pedersen Keel, Madison. Marine Staff Sergeant Philip Jordan, Enfield. Marine Corporal Kenefum Chawanse, Waterford. Marine Lance Corporal Lawrence Philippon, West Hartford. Marine Lance Corporal John Schmidt III, Brookfield.
Marine Sergeant David Couillard, Glastonbury. Marine Corporal Stephen Bixler, Suffield. Marine Captain Brian S. Latendra, New Britain. Marine Corporal Jordan Pearson, Milford. Marine Lance Corporal Philip Johnson, Enfield. Marine Corporal Kevin J. Dempsey, Monroe. Marine Corporal Christian Kottner, Waterbury. Marine Corporal Jacob Latour, Waterbury. Marine Lance Corporal Tyler Griffin, Voluntown. Navy SEAL Petty Officer Jason Dale Lewis, Brookfield.
Navy SEAL Chief Petty Officer Brian R. Bill, Stamford. Air Force Tech Sergeant John Chapman, Windsor Locks. Air Force Major Raymond G. Estelle, New Haven. Air Force Staff Sergeant Todd J. Labreco, Jr., Fairfield. And Coast Guard Petty Officer 3, Nathan Bruckenthal, Ridgefield.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. And with impeccable timing, we are very honored to have our Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, Commissioner, that was just perfect. He gets up every day in addition to his service, which he'll tell you about. He also makes sure that the 250,000 veterans that live in Connecticut have all of the medical care, housing, job training, education, and everything else that they need. Commissioner Sadi, welcome.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, Governor Lamont, General Yvonne, members of the military, most importantly, Gold Star families and veterans who are attending the ceremony remotely. I am truly humbled to stand in front of this wall of honor to remember and memorialize the men and women from Connecticut who made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation. I apologize for being out of breath. I ran in here. As Lieutenant Governor mentioned, I'm currently on active duty. I'm giving a 4-day pass to come back to Connecticut for the Memorial Day holiday. I ran into some traffic and running late, so I just want to catch my breath for a moment. You know, in these unique and challenging times, with the understandable focus on the COVID-19 pandemic and on the gradual reopening of the state of Connecticut, and with all the parades and nearly all Memorial Day ceremonies canceled, it is incumbent upon us, and I praise the Lieutenant Governor and General Yvonne for ensuring that we take the time to remind Connecticut residents to reflect on the service and sacrifice of those who have fallen in service to this nation, especially the 65 men and women from Connecticut who are memorialized on this wall. Whenever I meet with or address Gold Star families, it makes me think about my own family, my wife, my children, and loved ones, and what it would be like for them if they had to hear those words that I was not coming home. That is what the families of our fallen heroes and all who love them have had to endure. It is family and friends who supported these service members through their military careers, celebrated their successes, prayed for their safe return home when they were deployed, and grieved when they received the news that their loved one had fallen. I did not have the honor of knowing the men and women memorialized on the wall behind me. However, I made it my mission to learn about them and to read each of their biographies. They were sons and daughters, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, and friends. I mention those personal relationships because society must remember that the fallen, those memorialized here, and those throughout our history are not just names on a plaque, statistics in a report, or a line in a history book. They are people who lived and loved, who looked forward to coming home to family and to friends. And when they fell in service to this nation, they sacrificed 2 lives on that mantle of freedom, the life they had lived up until that day and the life they would not have the chance to live in the future. The men and women on this wall were from the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Coast Guard. They ranged in rank from private to lieutenant colonel, some barely 20 years old when they fell, and others in their 50s. They came from all walks of life, all ethnic backgrounds, and different racial and religious backgrounds. But they had one thing in common. They were brothers and sisters in arms who had volunteered for service to this nation and who made that ultimate sacrifice so that we may live free. To the Gold Star families, while my words cannot assuage your great loss that you feel each and every day, know that my prayers and that of all of us are with you. May God bless each of you, our veterans, and the United States of America. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you so much. We will now end our ceremony with the retiring of the colors. thank you again to the Connecticut National Guard Honor Guard. And we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Governor Lamont and I want to wish each of you a safe Memorial Day weekend, and we both look forward to the day when we can all gather once again in person. May God bless each of your families, our beautiful state, and our great country. Thank you again for joining us.